I still remember the look in my mother's eyes when she walked in on us. It wasn't just betrayal. It was like watching someone's entire world collapse in seconds. The worst part? I knew exactly how she felt. I'd worn that same expression when my husband cheated on me 3 years earlier. I never thought I'd be the one to break my mother's heart. We'd always been close. She raised me by herself after Dad left, worked 2 jobs to put me through college, and was my maid of honor at my wedding. She was my best friend. When she met James, I was genuinely happy for her. Mom was 52, beautiful, and had been alone for too long. James was 25. The age gap raised eyebrows, even mine at first, but he seemed to adore her. At first I thought, good for you, Mom. You deserve this. The first time I noticed something off was at her birthday dinner. The way he looked at me when Mom went to the kitchen, just a second too long. I brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things. Then came the texts. Innocent at first, asking about Mom's favorite flowers, what kind of movies she liked. Then late-night messages. You're the only one who really gets me. Your mom's amazing, but I can talk to you differently. Family dinners at my mother's house used to be my safe place, until her new boyfriend started brushing against me when nobody was looking. A hand on my lower back that lingered. Comments whispered when Mom couldn't hear. You look beautiful today. I should have shut it down immediately. I should have told my mother. I should have blocked his number. But something inside me, something broken from when my husband had his affair, responded to the attention. I told myself it was nothing, just friendly, just flattering, just harmless texts and conversations, until it wasn't. How does a happily married woman end up in a secret affair with her mother's boyfriend? And how do you live with yourself afterward? That's what I've been asking myself every single day for the past year. I'm not sharing this story for sympathy. I don't deserve any. I'm telling it because maybe you'll see something in yourself, in your relationships, in your choices that I didn't see until it was too late. Because trust me when I say, once you cross certain lines, you can never go back to who you were before. Welcome back to Infidelity Scandals, where we share real stories from real people about love, betrayal, and everything in between. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of these daily stories. I never thought I'd be the villain in my own story. Today, I'm sharing the darkest chapter of my life, not for sympathy, but because sometimes we need to see the damage through the eyes of the person who caused it. This isn't easy for me to talk about. I've spent a year in therapy trying to understand why I did what I did. My husband and I are still working through it. My relationship with my mother will never be the same. By the end of this story, you'll understand how easily boundaries can blur when you're vulnerable, how quickly justifications replace morality, and what happens when the web of lies finally collapses. You'll see how one bad decision leads to another until you wake up one day and don't recognize yourself anymore. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to show you exactly how someone who always thought of herself as a good person could do something so devastating to someone she loves. Because if it could happen to me, it could happen to anyone. Let me tell you about the people in this story. I'm 29, married to Eric for 6 years now. We live about 30 minutes from my mom's place in a small starter home we bought right after our wedding. 3 years ago, I found out Eric was having an affair with a coworker. It nearly destroyed us. We went to counseling, he changed jobs, and we've been trying to put the pieces back together ever since. Some days are better than others. My mom, Lisa, is 52. My dad passed away when I was in college. Heart attack, completely unexpected. Mom grieved hard for years, but finally started feeling like herself again. She's always been beautiful. People say we look like sisters. She works as an event planner, loves her job, has a great group of friends, but she'd been alone romantically for almost a decade. That's why I was so happy when she started dating again last year. She was nervous about it at first, figuring out dating apps, asking me for advice on her profile pictures. It was sweet, actually. She went on a few dates with guys her age, but nothing clicked. Then she met James. James is 25, 4 years younger than me. I remember when she first told me about him, I had concerns. The age gap seemed problematic. Mom was defensive, said age was just a number, that James was an old soul. I backed off. Who was I to judge after what had happened in my own marriage? When they'd been dating for about a month, Mom invited us over for dinner to meet him. I still remember that night so clearly. James was exactly what I expected, and nothing like I expected all at once. Tall, obviously good-looking, but not in that generic Instagram model way. He was charming, funny, seemed genuinely interested in everyone at the table. The way he looked at my mom, it seemed real. He kept refilling her wine glass, touching her hand when she talked. I remember thinking, maybe this is okay. Maybe he really does care about her. Eric noticed nothing unusual that night. He and James got along great, talking about basketball and some Netflix show they both watched. Mom was beaming the whole night, squeezing my hand when James went to the bathroom, whispering, "Isn't he wonderful?" But there was a moment, just one, when Mom was in the kitchen getting dessert, and Eric was helping her carry plates. James looked at me across the table and held eye contact just a few seconds too long. Something in his expression shifted. I felt a chill run down my back. Then Mom came back, and he was all smiles again. After that first dinner, Mom couldn't stop talking about how well James and I got along. "He thinks you're so smart," she'd say. Or, "James was asking about that book you mentioned." I'd smile and change the subject. The next few times we all got together, I noticed James would find ways to sit next to me, to create moments where we'd talk one-on-one. He asked thoughtful questions about my job, my interests, things my own husband had stopped asking years ago. I started looking forward to seeing him. I'd catch myself wondering what he'd think of an article I'd read or a show I'd watched. I began dressing more carefully when I knew he'd be around. I told myself I was protecting my mother by keeping an eye on him. Looking back, I was already creating excuses to be around him. I was already betraying her in my mind before anything physical ever happened. Meanwhile, things with Eric were still fragile. We'd have good weeks followed by terrible fights, where I'd throw his affair in his face. The trust wasn't back. Maybe it never would be. James knew all about this. My mother had told him everything about our marital problems. Another boundary crossed that I didn't recognize at the time. It started so innocently. Mom's birthday was coming up, and James texted me asking for gift ideas. He wanted to get her something really special, he said. Something that showed he really knew her. I was touched by that. What 25-year-old guy puts that much thought into his girlfriend's birthday? I suggested a weekend trip to this vineyard she'd always wanted to visit. He loved the idea and asked if we could meet for coffee to plan the details. I said yes without hesitation, without even telling Eric I was meeting him. That coffee turned into lunch. We talked about Mom for maybe 15 minutes, then somehow ended up discussing everything else. Books, movies, our childhoods. He told me about his parents' messy divorce, how he'd always been drawn to older, more stable women because of it. I found myself telling him things about my marriage I'd never told anyone. "It's like living with a stranger sometimes," I admitted. "Ever since I found out about the affair, I can't look at Eric the same way." James reached across the table and squeezed my hand, just for a second. "You deserve better than that," he said. "You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." I pulled my hand away, but the damage was done. I thought about that touch for days afterward. The texts increased. Morning check-ins. "Hope you have a good day at work." Late-night messages. Just thinking about our conversation. Nothing overtly inappropriate. Nothing I couldn't have shown to my mother or husband if they'd asked. But they never asked, and I never offered. Each message felt like stepping 1 inch over a line I couldn't even see anymore. When I'd get a notification from him, my heart would race. I'd wait to respond, telling myself I was keeping appropriate boundaries. Then I'd reply anyway, usually at night, usually after a glass of wine. One night after Eric and I had a fight, another argument about trust and his affair, I texted James, "Bad night. Could use a friend." He called instead of texting back. We talked for an hour. Eric was in the bedroom the whole time. I sat in my car in the garage so he wouldn't hear. He doesn't appreciate what he has, James told me. If you were mine, I'd never take you for granted. I should have hung up. I should have told my mother. I should have done 1,000 things differently. Instead, I said, "But I'm not yours. You're with my mother." There was a long pause before he answered. "I know. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate." But the words hung between us, creating possibilities I couldn't stop thinking about. I convinced myself that as long as nothing physical happened, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. It was just talking, just texting, just a connection with someone who understood me when I felt so alone. I compared it to what Eric had done. He'd had a full-blown physical affair for months. He'd lied to my face daily. What I was doing wasn't nearly as bad, I told myself. I wasn't sleeping with anyone. I was just enjoying the attention, the validation. The truth is, I was starving for someone to want me again. After Eric's affair, something broke in me. I didn't feel desirable anymore. I didn't feel worthy. And here was this young, attractive man choosing to talk to me, to text me, to make me feel seen. I knew it was wrong. I knew my mother was falling in love with him. But I couldn't stop myself from responding, from looking forward to those messages, from finding excuses to see him. Mom's birthday was getting closer, and James suggested we meet at his apartment to finalize the surprise party plans. I told myself it made perfect sense. We couldn't meet at Mom's place or anywhere she might see us, and a coffee shop felt too public for discussing surprise details. I told Eric I was meeting my friend Ashley for lunch. The first direct lie. James's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a 25-year-old guy. Minimalist furniture, a giant TV, video game controllers on the coffee table. But he'd cleaned up. I noticed that. He'd made an effort. He'd prepared lunch. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and salad. He'd bought my favorite seltzer water, which I'd mentioned once in passing. That detail struck me. Eric hadn't remembered my preferences in years. We sat at his kitchen counter, looking at our notes for Mom's party. Guest list, catering options, decorations, normal stuff. But there was this tension in the air, this awareness of being alone together for the first time. When our hands brushed reaching for the same piece of paper, neither of us pulled away immediately. I looked up at him, and he was already looking at me. "We shouldn't," I whispered. "I know," he said, but he was already leaning in. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds. 10 seconds that changed everything. I pulled away first, jumped up from the stool, grabbed my purse. "This is wrong," I said. "She's my mother. I can't do this to her." James didn't argue. He just looked at me with those eyes and said, "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you." I left his apartment shaking, sat in my car for 20 minutes crying, hating myself, swearing it would never happen again. I drove home and showered before Eric got back, like I could wash away what had happened. That night at dinner, Eric asked how lunch with Ashley was. I answered on autopilot, making up details about a meal I never had. In that moment, I became everything I had hated in my husband. The lying, the sneaking, the betrayal. I was doing it all now. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, that we'd still do the party for Mom, and then I'd distance myself from James. That telling Mom would only hurt her for no reason. I wish I could tell you that's what happened. But 3 days later, I was back at his apartment. This time, there were no pretenses about party planning. This time, I knew exactly what I was doing when I parked 6 blocks away, so no one who knew my mother would see my car. This time, when he opened the door, I walked straight into his arms. The affair accelerated quickly after that. We started meeting at his place every Tuesday and Thursday when Mom was at work. I told Eric I'd joined a book club. I told my boss I had therapy appointments. I told my mother I was swamped with a big project at work and couldn't talk much during the day. The lies multiplied. I had to keep a notes app on my phone to remember what I'd told to whom. I bought a book club book each week and read the summary online in case Eric asked about it. I set a different ringtone for James, so I'd know not to check my phone around Mom or Eric. Every lie made the next one easier. Soon, I had an entire second life my mother and husband knew nothing about. The worst part? I started to feel entitled to this secret happiness. After what Eric had put me through, didn't I deserve to feel wanted? Wasn't I owed this? James understood me in ways Eric never had. When I was with James, I wasn't the woman who'd been cheated on. I wasn't someone's daughter or wife. I was just me, desired and chosen. The fact that I was becoming the villain in my own mother's story, I pushed that thought down every time it surfaced. I became an expert at compartmentalizing. When I was with Mom, I was the loving daughter. When I was with Eric, I was the wife working on her marriage. When I was with James, I was this whole other person I barely recognized but couldn't stop being. Living a double life isn't like in the movies. It's constant stress. It's jumping every time your phone buzzes. It's panic when your husband picks up your cell to check the time. It's making sure you don't accidentally mention something James told you when you're talking to your mom. We had so many close calls. Once, I left my scarf at James's apartment. The next day, he wore it to dinner at my mom's house, claiming he'd just bought it. Mom commented on how it looked like mine. My heart nearly stopped. James laughed it off, saying great minds think alike. I excused myself to the bathroom and nearly threw up. Another time, Mom stopped by my house unexpectedly when I was supposed to be at book club. Luckily, I'd silenced my phone during my time with James and didn't see her texts until I was on my way home. I told her I'd gone for a walk after book club to clear my head. She believed me, because why wouldn't she? I was her daughter. The worst moments were family gatherings. Mother's Day brunch with Mom, James, Eric, and me, sitting across from James, pretending we were just cordial in-laws while playing footsie under the table. Watching my mother beam at him, so in love, so trusting. Seeing my husband finally relaxing around me again, thinking our marriage was healing. The guilt was crushing. I'd go to the bathroom and cry, then come back with a fixed smile, like nothing was wrong. I drink too much at these gatherings just to numb the self-hatred. Mom started talking about their future. I know it seems fast, she told me over lunch one day. But when you know, you know. She showed me a text where James had mentioned wanting kids someday. He knows I'm too old, but he says he'd rather be with me without children than with anyone else. Watching my mother talk about their future, knowing what I was doing behind her back. There aren't words for that kind of self-loathing. Around the 3-month mark of our affair, I started noticing things about James. Ways he would manipulate situations. How he'd tell me he couldn't see me because he had plans with my mother, making me jealous, making me work harder for his attention. How he'd accidentally send me a sweet text meant for her, then follow up with, "But it applies to you too." I started to see how he would subtly criticize my mother when we were alone, making me feel like I was somehow rescuing him. The same way he probably talked about me when they were together. "Your mom is amazing," he'd say, "but sometimes she doesn't get my jokes, not like you do." Or, "She's talking about redecorating my apartment. I don't have the heart to tell her I hate her style." Small things, tiny criticisms that built a wall between them and my mind. That made me feel special, different, better understood. I tried to end it 4 separate times. I'd delete his number, tell him we couldn't do this anymore, that it was destroying me. Each time, I'd be back in his bed within days. It was like an addiction. I hated myself for wanting him, but I couldn't stop. The 4th time I tried to end it, he showed up at my workplace. "Just happened to be in the area," he said. Wanted to make sure I was okay, since I wasn't answering his texts. It scared me how easily he could insert himself into my life, how little respect he had for my boundaries. But instead of seeing these as red flags, I was flattered by his persistence. I started having nightmares about my mother finding out. I'd wake up sweating, heart racing. Eric would hold me, thinking I was still traumatized by his affair. The irony made me sick. James started pushing for more. Wanted me to meet him on a weekend getaway. Said we deserved a full day together, not just stolen hours. I knew it was escalating out of control. I knew we were getting careless, but I said yes anyway. Told Eric I was going to a work conference. told Mom I couldn't make our usual Sunday dinner because of the same conference. All those lies, all those betrayals, just so I could have 24 uninterrupted hours with a man who was dating my mother. The day everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday. Mom was supposed to be at work until 6. James and I had our usual afternoon planned at his place, but at the last minute, he texted me, "Let's meet at your mom's house instead." I hesitated. We'd never crossed that line before. It felt even more wrong, somehow, to be together in her home. But James insisted, said his roommate was homesick, and we couldn't go to my place because Eric might come home early. Mom had given him a key weeks ago. It would be fine, he said. She never came home early on Tuesdays. I agreed. Another step deeper into this pit I'd been digging for months. I arrived first, let myself in with the spare key I'd had since college. It felt strange being in her house with these intentions. I looked at the family photos on the wall, pictures of Mom and me at my graduation, at my wedding, on vacation last year. In every single one, we were smiling, arms around each other, best friends. James arrived 20 minutes later. We didn't even make it past the living room. We were on the couch, my shirt already off, when we heard the front door open. There's a moment of panic that's unlike anything else. When you're caught doing something unforgivable, and there's absolutely no way to explain it away. No excuse, no lie that could possibly cover what was happening. My mother stood in the doorway, still holding her purse and car keys. She'd come home early because of a migraine. She stared at us, and for what felt like an eternity, nobody moved or spoke. Her face, I'll never forget the way her expression changed as it hit her. Confusion first, like her brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. Then shock. Then a pain so raw, so deep, that it physically hurt to witness. "Mom," I said, scrambling to grab my shirt, as if covering myself could somehow undo what she'd seen. She still didn't speak, just looked from me to James and back again, like she was trying to put together a puzzle with pieces that couldn't possibly fit. James moved first. "Lisa, this isn't what it looks like," he said, and even in that moment, I couldn't believe he'd try such a ridiculous line. Then he did something worse. "She's been coming on to me for weeks," he said. "I tried to stop it. I didn't want to hurt you." That's when Mom finally spoke. One word. "Out." Her voice was so quiet I barely heard it. "Mom, please," I started, moving toward her. "Don't," she shouted, backing away like I was something dangerous. "Both of you, get out of my house, now." James was already grabbing his jacket, heading for the door. "Lisa, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," she said. Then she looked directly at me, and I've never seen such betrayal in anyone's eyes. My daughter, my own daughter. In that frozen moment, I saw myself through my mother's eyes, and I didn't recognize the person I'd become. I was crying now, trying to get my shirt back on, trying to reach for her. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I don't know why." "Stop talking," she said. Her whole body was shaking. "Just stop. Get out." James had already reached the door. "Call me when you've calmed down," he said to Mom. Like this was just some minor argument that would blow over. My mother picked up the nearest object, a glass vase I'd given her for Christmas, and threw it at him. It shattered against the wall. "Get out, both of you." I've never seen my mother like that. She's always been the calm one, the reasonable one. James didn't even look at me as he left, just walked out without hesitation. He jumped in his car and drove away, leaving me there to face what we'd done. Mom collapsed onto a chair, her face in her hands, sobbing like I'd never heard anyone sob before. Deep, guttural cries that didn't even sound human. "Mom, please," I begged, kneeling in front of her. "Please let me explain." She looked up at me with swollen eyes. "Explain? Explain how you've been sleeping with my boyfriend? How long? How long has this been going on behind my back?" I couldn't answer. Any timeline would only hurt her more. "Get out," she said again, but quieter now, defeated. "Just go." I grabbed my purse, my keys. At the door, I turned back. "I'll call you tomorrow. We need to talk about this." "Don't," she said. "Don't call me. Don't come here. I can't even look at you right now." I drove home in a daze, pulled over twice to throw up on the side of the road. I called James repeatedly, straight to voicemail every time. He'd blocked me. He walked out without looking back at either of us. That's when I finally understood we had both been manipulated by someone who never cared about either of us. But that didn't excuse what I'd done. Nothing could. I drove around for hours after leaving my mom's house. I couldn't go home and face Eric. I couldn't process what had just happened. Everything was crashing down, and I had no one to blame but myself. Around midnight, I finally went home. Eric was waiting up, worried sick. He'd called my friends, my coworkers, even my mom, who hadn't answered. One look at my face, and he knew something was terribly wrong. "What happened? Are you hurt?" he asked, rushing to me. I couldn't even look him in the eye. I sat down on our couch, the same couch where we'd had countless conversations about his affair, where I'd cried and shouted and made him promise never to hurt me that way again. "I need to tell you something," I said. My voice didn't even sound like my own. I told him everything, from the first text messages to that afternoon at my mother's house. I didn't minimize it or make excuses. I just laid it all out. Every lie, every betrayal. Eric sat across from me, completely silent. His expression changed from confusion to disbelief, to anger, to something worse. Recognition. He recognized what I was describing because he'd done it himself. When I finished, he just said, "Get out." "Eric, please." "No," he said. "You don't get to beg. You don't get to cry. Not after what you put me through for my mistake. 3 years of punishment. 3 years of never letting me forget. And the whole time, you were capable of exactly the same thing." He stood up. "Worse, actually. Your own mother. Jesus, who are you?" I spent that night in a hotel. The next morning, I tried calling my mom again. No answer. I drove to her house, but she wouldn't open the door. I could see her car in the driveway. I knew she was home. "Mom, please," I called through the door. "I know I don't deserve it, but please just talk to me." Nothing. I left a letter in her mailbox, poured my heart out, my regret, my shame. I don't know if she ever read it. Within days, the entire family knew. My aunt, mom's sister, called to tell me she was disgusted with me. My cousins unfriended me on social media. My grandmother, who I'd been close with my entire life, told me she needed time to process what I'd done. I lost my mother, my self-respect, and nearly my marriage all at once. The worst punishment wasn't anyone's anger. It was knowing I deserved it all. Eric let me come home after 3 days, but only because, as he put it, "I'm not going to let your mess make me the bad guy again." We existed in the same space like ghosts, not speaking, not touching, just moving around each other in this horrible silence. I fell into a depression unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I couldn't eat. I lost 12 pounds in 2 weeks. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. I called in sick to work so many days they put me on probation. I kept trying to reach my mother, calls, texts, emails. Nothing. I drove by her house once and saw her walking to her car. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. When she saw me, she turned and went back inside. I'd always defined myself as a good daughter, a loyal person. Now I didn't know who I was anymore. If I was capable of this, what else was I capable of? The shame was suffocating. I thought about just leaving, packing a bag and disappearing, starting over somewhere where nobody knew what I'd done. I even had moments, dark moments in the middle of the night, where I thought about ending it all. The pain was that overwhelming. It was Eric who finally broke through, coming home one day to find me still in bed at 4 p.m., unwashed, staring at the wall. "This isn't helping anyone," he said. "Not your mom, not me, not you. Get up, take a shower. We're going to find you a therapist." I started therapy the next day. Intensive, twice-weekly sessions. My therapist didn't judge me or absolve me. She just helped me untangle the mess in my head. "Why did you do it?" she asked in our first session. "I don't know," I said. "Not good enough," she replied. "Dig deeper." So I did. I had to face the hardest question. Was I really any different from the husband I'd vilified for years? The answer was no. I was worse in some ways. I'd seen firsthand the devastation infidelity causes, and I'd done it anyway. To my own mother. 6 weeks into therapy, I hit rock bottom. I was sitting across from Dr. Winters, going in circles about how James had manipulated me, how vulnerable I'd been after Eric's affair, how the attention had filled a void in me. She just looked at me for a long moment and said, "These may all be factors, but they're not the reason. Tell me, what were you really trying to take from your mother?" The question stopped me cold. I wasn't trying to take anything from her. I loved my mom. And yet, of all the men in the world you could have had an affair with, you chose her partner. I started to defend myself, then stopped. For the first time, I really looked at my actions without excuses. "I don't know," I whispered. "I think you do," she said quietly. And suddenly, I did know. The answer broke me. I wanted to take back the power I felt my husband had taken from me. When Eric cheated, I lost control of my life, my narrative. I wasn't the good wife with the perfect marriage anymore. I was the woman who wasn't enough, who got cheated on. I was a victim. With James, I got to be the one in control, the one who was chosen. And by taking my mother's boyfriend, on some twisted level, I was proving I was still desirable, still powerful. I was no longer just a victim. I cried for the entire session. Not delicate tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken inside me. "I'm a terrible person," I finally managed to say. "No," Dr. Winters said. "You're a hurt person who did a terrible thing. There's a difference." She helped me see how James had recognized that hurt in both my mother and me. How he'd used different approaches, but similar tactics with us both. Making my mother feel young and desirable again after years alone. Making me feel powerful and wanted after being betrayed. "Predators have a radar for vulnerability," she explained, "and he found it in both of you." That night, I went home and really talked to Eric for the first time in weeks, not to make excuses or beg forgiveness, but to take full responsibility. "I did this," I told him, "not because of your affair, not because James manipulated me. I made these choices. I betrayed you, I betrayed my mother, and I betrayed myself." Something shifted between us in that moment. Not forgiveness, that would take much longer, but a tiny crack in the wall of hurt and anger we'd built. "What do you want now?" Eric asked. I thought about it carefully. "I want to be someone I can respect again. I want to make amends to you and my mother, even if neither of you can forgive me. And I want us to either rebuild our marriage with complete honesty or end it with dignity." For the first time in months, Eric actually looked at me. Really looked at me. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," he said. "I know. I don't know if I deserve to be trusted, but I'm going to work on becoming trustworthy again, whether you stay or go." We agreed to try marriage counseling, not with any guarantees, but with a commitment to honesty, however painful. That weekend, I wrote my mother a letter, not asking for forgiveness, not making excuses, just acknowledging the pain I'd caused her, taking complete responsibility, and letting her know I would respect whatever boundaries she needed, for however long she needed them. I couldn't undo what I'd done, but I could stop hiding from the person I had become. I could face that person honestly and decide what kind of person I wanted to be going forward. The rebuilding process was slow and often painful. Eric and I started marriage counseling, tough, raw sessions where we had to face not just my affair, but all the unhealed damage from his affair that had festered between us. Our therapist didn't let either of us hide. She made us talk about the hardest things, the details of my betrayal, the lingering resentment from his, the question of whether our marriage had ever been healthy to begin with. Some sessions ended with us sitting in silence on the drive home. Some ended with breakthroughs that felt like we could actually find our way back to each other. Most were somewhere in between, Small steps forward in rebuilding something we both recognized would never be the same, but might eventually be stronger. With my mother, the process was different. There was nothing but silence from her end. I respected her boundaries. I didn't show up at her house or workplace anymore, but I started writing her letters. I sent a letter every month for a year. I never knew if she read them or threw them away unopened. I just knew I had to keep acknowledging what I'd done. I didn't write them expecting forgiveness. I wrote them because I wanted her to know I hadn't forgotten, wasn't moving on like nothing had happened. The letters weren't about me or my feelings. They were updates on my therapy, my work on understanding why I'd betrayed her, the steps I was taking to become someone who would never do such a thing again. In my third letter, I finally wrote about James, not to shift blame, but because I'd learned something disturbing. Through mutual friends, I discovered he had a history of this exact behavior, dating older women and then becoming involved with their daughters or younger relatives. He'd done it to at least 2 families before ours. I debated whether to share this information with my mother. Would it seem like I was making excuses? But my therapist helped me see that warning her was the right thing to do, even if she never wanted to speak to me again. I have no idea if that letter made any difference to her. The silence continued. Holidays were the hardest. Thanksgiving at my grandmother's house, Mom declined to come when she heard I would be there. Christmas without our traditional mother-daughter shopping trip. My birthday passed without her call for the first time in my life. Eric and I slowly found our way back to something like trust. Not the blind, untested trust of our early marriage, but something more realistic and hard-won. We both knew now what we were capable of, the damage we could inflict. But we also knew we were choosing to stay, to work through it, to build something new. About 18 months after everything fell apart, I got a text from my mother. Just 4 words. Coffee, Tuesday, 10 a.m., Beanery. The cafe was a neutral location, halfway between our homes. I got there 30 minutes early, my heart racing so hard I thought I might pass out. When she walked in, we both froze for a moment. She'd lost weight. Her hair had more gray than I remembered. She looked tired but determined. She sat down across from me, ordered her coffee, and got straight to the point. When she finally agreed to meet, she said she wasn't there to forgive me. She was there because she needed to understand how her daughter could do this to her. That first conversation was one of the hardest of my life. Mom didn't yell or cry. She asked direct, painful questions and insisted on honest answers. Were you thinking about me at all? Did you consider what this would do to me? Did you ever plan to tell me, or were you just going to keep lying indefinitely? How could you look me in the eye at family dinners, knowing what you were doing? I answered everything as truthfully as I could, even when the truth was ugly. I didn't try to make myself look better or minimize what I'd done. When she asked why James, and not literally any other man in the world, I told her about my therapy breakthrough, about trying to reclaim power after feeling powerless, about the toxic way I'd responded to being hurt. That makes sense, she said finally, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. We talked for almost 3 hours. As she was getting ready to leave, she said, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if our relationship can come back from this, but I'm tired of letting what you did define my life. I'm trying to move forward. Looking back now, after 3 years of therapy and hard work on myself, I can see things I was blind to then. The most important lesson I've learned: unhealed wounds don't just hurt you, they make you capable of hurting others in ways you never thought possible. When Eric cheated on me, I thought the pain made me more understanding, more empathetic. I was wrong. I learned that pain doesn't make you more empathetic. Sometimes it just makes you dangerous to the people you love. When we don't process our trauma, we risk passing it on to others, often the people closest to us. I've come to understand how betrayal slowly warps your moral boundaries. It doesn't happen all at once. You don't wake up one day and decide to have an affair with your mother's boyfriend. It happens in tiny steps, each one barely noticeable. A text message that goes a little too far. A coffee meeting that lasts too long. A thought you should have shut down, but instead let linger. Each small choice makes the next bad choice easier. I've also learned so much about how manipulative people operate. James wasn't just some guy who happened to be attracted to both my mother and me. He deliberately created situations where boundaries could be crossed. He studied what each of us needed and became exactly that person. Now I can see how he manufactured situations where we were alone, how he positioned himself as understanding me better than anyone else. How he'd say things like, "I've never told anyone this before, but," to make me feel special. How he'd subtly encourage me to keep secrets from my mother, testing my willingness to deceive her long before anything physical happened. The red flags were there from the beginning. The way he triangulated us, telling my mother how much we got along, telling me things about her that made me feel like her confidant. The way he isolated both of us, becoming my mother's primary social connection, becoming my secret keeper separate from my husband. I've learned the danger of trying to heal relationship wounds through another relationship. The void I felt after Eric's betrayal couldn't be filled by James or anyone else. That healing had to come from within me, from facing my pain directly instead of trying to escape it. The hardest part of this journey has been rebuilding my identity. For months, all I could see when I looked in the mirror was cheater, betrayer, daughter who hurt her mother. My therapist helped me understand that while I did those terrible things, they don't have to define who I am forever. I've developed a practice of radical honesty in all my relationships now. Not cruel honesty that disregards others' feelings, but a commitment to never again building my life on lies. Even small lies feel dangerous to me now. I know where they can lead. The work of rebuilding trust is never really done. With Eric, we've reached a place of cautious trust, strengthened by consistent honesty over time. With my mother, it's still fragile, still being tested with each interaction. I will spend the rest of my life proving, mostly to myself, that I am not defined by the worst thing I've ever done. That one terrible chapter doesn't have to be the whole story of my life. That redemption is possible, not through forgetting what happened, but through using it to become someone who would never make those choices again. It's been 3 years since that terrible day in my mother's living room. 3 years of therapy, of difficult conversations, of rebuilding what I destroyed. I won't pretend everything is fixed, or that relationships can ever go back to what they were before betrayal. They can't. But they can evolve into something different, something that carries the scars, but isn't defined by them. My mother and I have coffee once a month now. We don't talk about him anymore. We're building something new that acknowledges the past without living in it. The easy closeness we once had is gone, replaced by something more careful, more intentional. We're getting to know each other again as the people we are now, not who we were before. Eric and I renewed our vows last year in a small private ceremony, not to erase what happened, but to acknowledge that we're choosing this marriage with our eyes wide open, fully aware of each other's capacity for both harm and healing. Our relationship is more honest now, less idealized, more real. We don't take each other for granted anymore. I've learned there's no such thing as betrayal that only hurts one person. It's always a stone thrown into water. The ripples touch everyone. My actions hurt my mother, my husband, my extended family, even myself in ways I couldn't have imagined. The hardest lesson has been learning to forgive myself without excusing my actions. Punishment doesn't fix what I broke. Only consistent, honest effort to be better can do that. I can hold two truths at once. I did something terrible, and I am more than the worst thing I've done. If you're watching this and you're in crisis, if you're feeling lonely or unwanted or invisible in your relationship, please hear me. You are incredibly vulnerable to manipulation right now. People like James can sense that pain like sharks sense blood in water. Be careful who you let in during these moments. Get professional help instead of looking for validation from someone who might have their own agenda. If you're the one who's betrayed someone you love, and you're drowning in shame, thinking there's no way back, there is a path forward. It's not quick or easy. It requires complete honesty, genuine remorse, and patience, while the person you hurt processes their pain. Sometimes relationships can't be saved, but you can still save yourself from repeating these patterns. I want to invite you to share your experiences in the comments, whether you've been betrayed or been the betrayer. No judgment here. We're all human, all capable of hurting others and being hurt. But please keep your comments respectful. This isn't about taking sides or simplistic judgments. This is about understanding the complex ways we hurt each other and how we might find healing. I'm sharing this not to be absolved, but because secrets keep us sick. If you're hiding something that's eating you alive, I hope this gives you courage to face it. The truth is painful, but living a lie is a slow death of who you really are. Next week, I've asked my husband to join me here. We'll talk about what it takes to rebuild trust after both partners have broken it, the reality of forgiveness, the daily choice to stay, and how to create a relationship that's stronger at the broken places. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you for listening to my story, the good, the bad, and the ugly parts. Your shares and comments let me know this video is helping people, and that's the only way I can make meaning from the pain I caused.